My name is Alex, and if you're new here, this is my little YouTube channel. I live and work in Japan, and I like to make little vlogs about my life here. I also make a few videos about the JADE program, which is what I'm doing today. And I used to be on the JADE program for 1 year last year, not a long time, but in that 1 year, it was quite the roller coaster of experiences. So today I'd like to talk about my best and worst experiences slash pros and cons of the program. And if you've watched any other videos of me yappa-yappaing talking about the JADE program, you know that I always talk about every situation is different. My experiences are not going to be your experiences, but I think this video could be helpful in giving you an idea of what to expect or what could possibly happen. So without too much preamble, I will start with the good or my best experiences, what I like about the program, and then my more negative perceptions and experiences of the program. So let's begin. All right, so number one would be discipline. I think in general, 98% of the time, don't quote me on that number, your Japanese students will be more well behaved and more reserved. And I'll talk a little bit more about the flip side of that, but I think straight out the bat, that is a big positive. If I think back to my high school career, your teachers had to be very stern and very strict in order to get a good sense of discipline in the classroom. And while there are students who are unruly and who will misbehave, in general, you will have pretty chill classes. And that was a big thing for me coming into the program. As soon as I heard that I was going to get a high school, I was very nervous because I don't know what to expect. It was my first time officially teaching. But I have to say that I was pretty surprised at even the worst behaved student was nowhere near what I've experienced in high school. And while I think being reserved can be a challenge in the classroom, in general, it's a good teaching environment and you're able to get your activities done with minimal distractions, which I think at the end of the day is a good thing as a teacher. Number two, I'm just checking my notes so I don't get off course as I often do. For number two, I think a big benefit or the best part of the program is your opportunity to learn more about Japan. So number one, you're in the country itself. You're getting to experience a workplace, your community, the students. You're getting to experience all of that from within the country, which I think can be invaluable as an experience. And I found that some teachers are very willing to teach you a lot about Japan or about your area where you're situated if you ask. So this might take a little bit of Japanese skill, but if you're lucky, some of the teachers do speak English and they're very happy to share their information. And one thing that I really enjoyed was when I first started at my school, the students made a presentation about information on the area where I was living and museums that you could check out, restaurants that they recommend, and views or landscapes that they thought were beautiful. Because I was in Hokkaido, so there's a lot of nature to see. And I really appreciated that. So you can get like a first-hand experience, like a local tour guide, if you will, from your teachers and your students. Of course, everyone's very busy, so read the room before you ask them like, what do you recommend I do this weekend? But it's still worth a shot. And I learned a lot about Hokkaido and also the area that I was living in just from student recommendations and especially home economics and history and geography teachers. They're a gem of information. Number three would be the teaching experience that you pick up on the JADE program. Now, I know that we can go back and forth about this because on the JADE program, you are an assistant language teacher. You're not the main teacher. And like I said, every situation is different. In some schools, I have heard of ALTs who teach basically the entire lesson with the teacher there. And I've heard and experienced other situations where you are just in class and maybe the most you do is reading from the grammar or the vocabulary textbook and then you call it a day. So in those cases, it can be difficult to see that you're getting any valuable experience, but I think this becomes a perspective thing because I think any classroom experience is good experience. I think being in the classroom teaches you more about the Japanese education system, education in general, And it can also give you an idea of whether you want to continue with education or not. I've seen a lot of people's careers pivot after JET because they were just like, this is not something that I see myself doing long term. Other people fell in love with it and they were like, I love teaching, I love this environment, so I'm going to complete my further education in education and then come back as an English teacher or another teacher in a different capacity. Sorry, English is failing me. Number 4 is a little bit of a double-edged sword. So on the JET program, it's inevitable that you're going to have a lot of free time at some point during your teaching career. And this can be a good or a bad thing depending on how you use it, and also depending on your placement. In my case, on a very busy day, I would have 5 classes out of the 7 or 8 classes total for the day. And I love those days because I love being busy. But in general, my schedule was 2, maybe 3 English classes, and then I was in the staff room for the rest of the day. So again, every situation is different, and depending on what your school allows you, you can study in that time. You could study Japanese, you could complete another degree. I've heard of people who have completed their postgraduate degrees while on the JET program. You can do something in a completely different field. Like I've heard of people drawing and doing like digital art while on the program. Again, you need to clear this with your English teachers, with your vice principal, and I think most importantly, not be wasting their time or getting in the way of anyone's schedule with what you're doing. Don't prioritize your other projects over what you came to Japan or what you came on the JET program to do. At the end of my program, I didn't really see the free time as a positive for me because I felt like I was wasting my time, and also I felt like I had to find things to do to fill the time or to kill time. But another perspective is my friend who told me she really loves the free time because she came from a job that was very high pressure and she was on her feet the whole day. So to come to a job where you're essentially paid for, like 2 or 3 classes and then you keep yourself busy for the rest of the day is a big benefit for her. So again, I think perspective matters, but just the fact that in your day to day, most likely you're going to have a lot of free time, I think is a huge benefit for any job. Okay, and then number 5, the final point on the good spectrum, Japanese hospitality slash kindness slash snack giving culture. So, giving snacks or presents, sometimes called omiyage, is a big practice in Japan. So, a lot of coworkers, when they go on trips outside of the school, they'll usually bring back some snacks for the rest of the staff. I think it's a great practice because I love snacks. And I found that some people do it, some people don't. If you feel inclined to do so, it will be very much appreciated because people love to hear where in Japan you traveled and what snacks you got. It's very interesting. they just love it. But if you decide to go on a trip and you don't bring anything back, like don't feel pressured to buy anything for anyone. Like it's not stipulated in your contract. But I benefited from this cultural norm a lot where people would usually bring snacks back for the entire staff room. And for my birthday, which happened 3 months after starting the program, one of my schools got some of the students together and they bought me like a snack bag and they wrote my name on the board with a happy birthday message. And I thought that was so adorable, like it was so sweet. So much of what I've experienced in Japan and even in a school or work environment is that people are very generous with food, especially in Japanese culture, with like making sure that you are eating well and you're healthy. So I thought that was amazing. And I would have put it at the top of my list, but I think the other points are more important. So those are my good experiences on the JET program. Let's commence into the not so good. My first point has to do with your career and career trajectory. So in JET, there is little to no upward mobility. You have to check the contract or on the website just to be sure because my memory is a little foggy here. But I know your salary increases after the first, second, and third year, and then it stays stable. The maximum you can do is 5 years on the JET program. But if the school really likes you, I've heard of cases where people get directly hired by the school or the Board of Education. But Most of the time, if you're in the JET program, you're going to be an ALT finish and class. That's all. And most likely, the position you have, the work that you're doing, that's what you're going to be doing for the duration of the program. Now, if you've set out to do this and you know that that's what you want, great, that's no problem. But for other people who maybe want to advance in the education field, this can be a little bit of a hindrance, like it can box you in. My second more negative point would be discipline, but now the other side of discipline. So I mentioned before that the kids are generally reserved and well behaved, but along with that comes a lot of lackluster energy as well. And the kids in Japan are generally tired. I personally think they're too overworked. They have too many activities, they study too much. So by the time it comes to English, a course that many of them really don't see the benefit of, it can be quite difficult to engage students in lessons. So I mention it as a negative, but it's more of a challenge to you as a teacher in order to make your classes more interesting and to make activities more creative. And you're going to have different levels of students in your class. So you're going to have those kids that I mentioned who want to go overseas, they want to work or study abroad, so they will be working a bit harder. I'm realizing now that maybe I didn't mention that, but those are also students that you can have in your class, versus other students who have decided that they maybe want to stay in Japan their entire life, and there's nothing wrong with that. So they don't see the need for English. So you're going to have to find and tailor activities for each level of student, and that can be a challenge if it's your first time teaching. The sun is going away now. And a little additional to this point, so it's like a 2.1 number 2.1 is that also along discipline, in my experience with Japanese schools, is that the Japanese teachers don't really outwardly or vocally discipline students. So there will be cases where the teacher is speaking and some students are having their own conversations there in the class, and it's very disruptive. And in a lot of cases, actually all the cases that I've seen, the teachers won't be like, shut up! Like, they'll just keep talking, they'll just keep giving their instructions, and then afterwards the student is like, wakanai, and it's like, of course wakanai, because you weren't listening. So in many cases that happened to the main teachers. It didn't happen to me very often because I also cut it off from the first time it happened, from like the get-go. So what I noticed is that a lot of Japanese students, even the ones who are unruly and look like they are attention seeking, they don't like to have all eyes on them. So if I see that students are having their own conversation while I'm speaking, I'll also stop and I'll be like, are you finished? And they hate it. They get so embarrassed, and then it never happens again. So there are going to be times where you have to find your own ways to do some soft disciplining, because in many cases the teachers won't do that themselves. All right, and then number 3 is more for the people and the girlies who look like me. A lot of Japanese people have experience with white foreigners, and in Hokkaido there are not a lot of foreigners, full stop. So I am somebody that many people have never seen in their lives before. So I got a lot of stares. I got a lot of questions about Africa and me as a person. Some people didn't know that we have internet in South Africa, and I was like, how do you think I got here? And a lot of people's like jumping place, like what they know about South Africa is very outdated. Like they know about Nelson Mandela and that's about it. So I don't think the geography lessons in Japanese schools are very expansive, but there is a lot that my students didn't know. Now, that being said, as a person of color, as somebody who sees all the racism and all the BS that goes on in the world in general, I will say in Japan, I've experienced like a minuscule amount of that. I have not experienced outward racism. I've not experienced any bodily harm done to me, and I've not experienced anyone like verbally or physically abusing me because of what I look like. What I have experienced is what I call like ignorance or closed-mindedness. When I was living in Hokkaido, a lot of the shops that I would go into, the staff attendants would like physically turn their bodies away from me or walk to another point in the store where they weren't in contact with me. And over time, I learned, or at least I choose to believe, that it's more because they are nervous to speak English than it is them being afraid of like me and my skin color and my hair type. I know that a lot of people are not used to foreigners. A lot of I've had so many encounters where people just like freeze up when they're supposed to talk to me. And that's a whole other conversation by itself. So, if you are somebody who is coming here and you are not of European descent, especially if you're coming from Africa like I did, keep an open mind to the experiences that you could have. But I will say that I've heard of very, very few cases where people were outwardly treated badly because of their skin color, because of what they look like. Yeah. The sun is gone and it's getting cold. Yeah. Okay, almost done. Sorry about the video quality, it's getting a little dark, so now it looks so gray and sad. Which might be perfect for the next point. So, number 4 is isolation. And I think this is something you will inevitably feel in Japan, regardless of the career that you choose. Because I think most of Japanese society is still very cut off from each other, especially the older generation, but I'm noticing it in younger people as well. Again, I don't want to speak in generalizations, and I don't want to say that the entire Japan is like this, but you can see it in the day to day. I see it with my students, I see it with some of my coworkers, and I can't say that this is a toxic work environment. I very much enjoy the job that I have now and the people that I work with. However, the Japanese society of it all is still quite cut off from each other. And you can watch the documentaries, you can speak to people who also live in the country who will tell you the same thing. It's a very passive culture, and a lot of people are just not in tune with each other. And in my situation with my one school, a lot of the staff was much older than I was. They didn't speak English. And as much as they tried and I tried, like they would try with a little bit of English, I tried with a little bit of Japanese, there was still a huge disconnect between us. And added to that, that Japanese workplaces are very hierarchical, and very cold in general. Like cold, yes, temperature wise, but cold in terms of social norms as well. Once again, this is not to say it will be your experience, but I did experience at my one school specifically, the staff room was very, it was so quiet, and people weren't really talking to each other. When they did speak to each other, it was very stiff and formal. Um, 0 out of 10 for workplace cohesiveness and working together with each other. So I always recommend to anyone who's saying they're coming on the JET program to connect with your fellow jetlings that are coming with you. And also when you get to your area, to go on Facebook to find line groups and line contacts, and just find people. Just find people, try and find yourself a social circle as soon as possible. And it doesn't even have to be within the JET program. If you are in a more urban area, you're going to find other foreigners, you're going to find other Japanese people that you can be friends with. Just start as early as possible. All right, and then the final point of the not so good list is communication. And this can be a long and drawn out subject. And I'm not talking about communication in terms of like speaking the same language. I mean communication at your schools. This is a big, every situation is different situation. But I had so much communication problems at my one school. And not even that we were getting into arguments, because that would have been more favorable because then we're actually talking about the thing. But there were so many events that happened at school that I just had no idea about. And classes changing, and sometimes the class periods are 5 minutes or 10 minutes shorter, and nobody would tell me anything. And this is when I was well adjusted and like into the program already. I watched another YouTuber who was telling a story of a event happening in the gym that nobody told her about. Like everyone just walked out of the staff room and she heard these drums playing and she went to go check it out, and it was a whole concert happening. I can't I don't know why that happens. Personally, I don't know. I have my thoughts, I have my musings, but I have no idea why it happens. Just know that that's possible. You could have a really good relationship with your manager, with your supervisor, but some things slip through the cracks. I think a big part of it is that the teachers are overworked and sometimes they just genuinely do forget, but I still find that unacceptable. But so that's something that can happen. Happened to me a lot of times. If you are coming onto the Jade program, make sure that you are checking in recently, frequently with your managers, with your supervisors. Ask them at the start of the day, is there anything you need to know about? Or if you don't want to do daily checks, which I recommend, but you can do weekly checks. Just find out, is there any tests? Are there any tests? English teachers, are there any school events happening that you need to know about? Try your best to stay on top of it as much as you can. All right, and with that, that's the end of the video. I tried to keep it as short as possible. If you have any questions about the JADE program and I'm able to answer them, I will try my best, or I will try and refer you to somebody or a website that knows more than I do. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.